everyone, and welcome to, well, I guess it's still technically the Netflix Knowhow right now, but if you read the title of this video, yes, that is correct. I am going to be rebranding the channel soon. What this means for the actual content is not a whole lot. I'm still going to be bringing you pretty much the same stuff I have been for the past few years, but it's just going to be a little bit rethemed. It's going to focus on some slightly different stuff, but I'm going to talk more about that later in this video. First, what I want to talk about is something I probably should have done about a month ago, and I'm definitely a little late bringing you this, but 2019 is over. We're already well into 2020 by now, and I have yet to mention my favorite and my least favorite films of 2019. Now, just like last year, I'm not really going to put these in any sort of specific order or hierarchy. It's just going to be a list of kind of the films I really enjoyed this past year, as well as some of the films I didn't really care for so much. Overall, I do have to say that 2019 actually was a very good year for films, because when I was going through and looking at all the films I watched from last year, I realized there were a lot of them that I really enjoyed, and I was kind of struggling to put together a worst of list. Part of that may have to do with the fact that I do actively try and avoid the bad movies as best I can. I am but a poor fellow, I don't have a lot of money, and seeing movies does cost something out of my pocket. So if I'm going to be paying to go see them, I'm going to try not to see the bad ones if I can avoid them. With that said, there were still a few clunkers that snuck by, but by far most of the films I saw this year were excellent. So, to kick things off, Fighting with My Family was one of those films that kind of snuck up on me and came out of nowhere. I didn't really know much about the film going in, other than it was a film that was produced by WWE and Vince McMahon under their, wrestling umbrella, and so I wasn't quite sure what to expect from this film. With that said, this is probably one of the best character-driven drama comedies of the whole year. It is fantastic. The performances are great, the writing is great, the direction is fantastic. It's just an all-around feel-good movie. It'll make you laugh, it'll make you cry. It has all of the emotions wrapped into it in the best way possible. So if you haven't seen Fighting with My Family, I definitely recommend you go check it out. It's well worth the watch. Shazam! Oh my god, Shazam was such a fun comic book movie ride this summer. I had so much fun watching this film. Funny story about this movie, actually. I had to go see it twice, not for the reasons that you're thinking. When I went to go see it the first time, I got most of the way through the movie, and then right at the very end and the big climax where they're fighting the bad guy and there's this big showdown going on, the power cut out in the theater. Unfortunately, they couldn't get the power turned back on, so I had to wait and get a ticket, and I had to go back a couple months later to finish the movie off again. But you know what? Even if that wasn't the case with this film, I still may have gone and saw it a second time because it is so much fun. Just the energy, the humor, the characters, everything was just so thrilling and exciting, and it was good just to see a really lighthearted, feel-good comic book hero movie. The Public was one of the smaller films that was released in 2019, so not a lot of people went to see it, and I'm sure not a lot of people have even heard of this film. It does a really good job of representing the struggles of homelessness and the things that they go through and the struggles that they face, and even though it did kind of come off heavy-handed in places, I don't think it was too much. I'm definitely kind of a sucker for films that pander a little bit toward the social activist and human rights crowd, and sometimes they can go a little bit too far with their messages, but I think this one struck a good balance, so The Public was a really good film. Definitely recommend that one. Oh boy, we waited a long time for this movie. It's been a decade in the making. A whole universe has been spun out of this thing. And let me tell you, Avengers Endgame, definitely worth the wait. At the start of 2019, I actually made a wager with one of my friends that Shazam was actually going to be the comic book hero movie of the summer as opposed to Avengers Endgame. I know, blasphemy on my part. Needless to say, Avengers Endgame, it was an absolute thrill ride. From beginning to end, I was on the edge of my seat, all 3 hours of it. Considering that something of this scope and scale has never really been done before, I'm amazed that they were able to stick the landing this good with this film. So if you're a fan of the Marvel series, if you're a fan of the universe, if you haven't seen Endgame yet, go see it. If you've already seen it, go watch it again. It is an absolutely fantastic epic. I cannot recommend it more. Similar to Fighting with My Family, Long Shot was one of those movies that kind of snuck up on me and kind of hit me right in the feels out of nowhere. I was a little on the fence about it initially just because I like Seth Rogen, but I don't always like everything he does, and so I wasn't quite sure if this was going to actually be a good, witty, like comedy movie, or if it was just gonna be kind of lazy and gross and, you know, bottom of the barrel type humor. Luckily, the film has a really strong focus on characters and the bonds that they form together. It does a really good job of portraying this high-profile, powerful person in the political world and how they're just still a normal human being at the end of the day. They have regular problems, they have regular emotions, and they just want someone to love. Long Shot was warm, it was heartfelt, it had great characters. Go check it out if you haven't already. You know, I really didn't want to put this one on my best list at the end of the year. It's not that I have anything against the Toy Story films or against Toy Story 4 in particular, it's just when this movie was announced, I was really getting a lot of emotions of, why are we doing this? Did we really need a fourth one? And the answer to that question is, yes? But seriously, Pixar, Disney, no more of these films. We've gotten 4 great films out of them. Stop while you're ahead, you're gonna screw it up if you keep going. The story is finished. Walking out of the theater after seeing Ad Astra, my very first thought about the film was, this is the Interstellar that we deserved. Now, I'm not saying that Interstellar was a bad film by any means. It was wonderful, it had amazing visuals, the scope of it, the scale of it, nobody can match Christopher Nolan when it comes to those things. But where the ideas and themes in Interstellar seemed to get a little bit muddled and didn't seem to have a lot of focus in parts, Ad Astra nails them. It is very much a character-driven film, and Brad Pitt does an absolutely phenomenal job with the role. For a world set in the future where things seem to be going relatively well, man, this is a really depressing movie, and it shows that no matter how far humanity progresses, no matter the advances we make, we are still flawed beings, and there's just nothing we can do to escape that. Ad Astra is a film that is going to leave you thinking long after the credits have rolled, and I wouldn't be surprised if one day this eventually goes down in history as one of the sci-fi great films. Oh boy, this movie. Parasite is an experience. That's kind of the best way I can explain this thing. Bong Joon-ho is definitely one of the most ambitious visionary filmmakers working in the business today, and even though I don't necessarily like all of his films, I always respect them for their scope and scale and their ideas. Nobody else in the world makes movies like this guy, and Parasite is definitely one of his best. It tackles themes of social inequality, class warfare, and it does so in such a unique and enthralling way. No other person besides Bong Joon-ho could have made this movie. It's already racked up several awards and is currently the favorite to win the Academy Award for Best Picture, and deservedly so. So if you haven't seen Parasite yet, go check it out. It is an amazing, surreal adventure. Adam Driver had a really good year in 2019. What with the success of The Rise of Skywalker, the critical praise he received for his work in Marriage Story, and what he did in one of his lesser known films from 2019, The Report. The Report chronicles the investigation that was done into the questionable and oftentimes morally unethical and even illegal acts performed for counterterrorism during the Bush years. For a film that's mostly a lot of talking and a lot of doing research, wow, this was a really thrilling and exciting movie. I guess it kind of depends on how you feel about political thrillers and things like that, but man, when you watch this movie, it pains you to see all of the corruption and the bad things and deeds that people did during that time. Now, I'm aware that it's a film and a lot of things have been dramatized and this is not how things actually went down, but just the raw emotion and power of it is just so overwhelming. And the righteous fury and passion that Adam Driver imbues into his performance is just magnetic. You cannot look away from this. Now, I watch a lot of horror movies and I've seen a lot of things, but The Report definitely came off as the most horrifying and disturbing movie that I saw all year. Damn, Joker. You did not hold back with those punches, did you? I was really curious to see how Joker was going to turn out, especially considering all of the trailers and promotion beforehand weren't really all that exciting to me. This is a classic case where the marketing and the promotion vastly undersold the final product. Now, Joker is not going to be a film for everybody. If you like sunshine and rainbows and happiness, this is really not going to be the movie for you. But if you want to see a film that really dives down into the nitty-gritty and the ugly and the terrible things about humanity, this is the film for you. Not only is this film an absolute experience to witness, but it does an amazing job of portraying the Joker as a really, really empathetic and relatable human being, and you understand why he is the way he is. Any film, any story that can make the Joker, of all people, one of the most iconic and infamous villains in all of history, come out looking like not the bad guy is a success in my book. And those were my favorite movies of 2019. So that's all of the good. Now for the flip side of that equation, the bad. Now, like I said earlier, I didn't see a ton of terrible movies this year, and even the bad ones honestly weren't god awful. They just were kind of meh. Good thing for movie viewing, maybe not the best for creating engaging content on YouTube, but what can you do? So with that out of the way, let's talk about the worst movies of 2019, starting with... You know, all things considered, Escape Room is nowhere near as bad as it should have been. It was well put together, the pacing was good, even the characters were pretty relatable and solid all around. It's just, the problem is, it turns out escape rooms are a lot better when you're doing them and a lot less fun when you're just watching someone else do it, even if there is life and death stakes on the line. So Escape Room was better than it had any right to be, but still a pretty underwhelming affair all around. Ah, there's the M. Night Shyamalan I know and love. Ugh, this guy, could he be any more consistent with his movies? I actually really liked Unbreakable. I think it's one of Shyamalan's more underrated films. And I also really liked Split. I saw it as kind of a return to form for this once high-profile film director who had fallen from grace. And so the hype for Glass was definitely pretty high up there. I had some pretty high expectations for this. And then the movie that we got just fell so flat. For a movie named after what is presumed to be the main character of the film, he sure doesn't do a whole lot in it until halfway through. It just wasn't the exciting conclusion to this saga that we were expecting, and I kind of feel like Shyamalan pieced this thing together after the success of Split, because it really doesn't feel like he quite knew what he was doing here. It's worth a watch if you're a completist, but if you're already not a fan of Unbreakable or Split or just M. Night Shyamalan in general, this film is not going to do anything for you. I will say this is probably one of the prettiest movies released in 2019. For a film that relied pretty heavily on CGI and motion capture graphics, it looks remarkably good, and I think this is going to hold up even years from now. It definitely captures the anime look and feel, which I think is a great respect to the source material. Unfortunately, that's about where the praise has to stop. The characters are non-existent. The story and the plot are pretty much just a flat line with a few little bumps thrown in. There's no cohesive direction to any of it. It really feels more like the introduction to a movie instead of its own standalone story. Nothing's really resolved by the end of it, and so by the time you finish the film, you're waiting for something bigger to actually happen, but it's not there because you've already finished it. I know that the people who worked on this film have a lot of respect for the source material, and you can definitely tell that, but man, it just feels like they had so much stuff that they had to cram into one single story, and just none of it ended up working in the end. I know I'm gonna get a lot of flack for this, but Captain Marvel was really not good. Now, I want to preface this by saying, when I saw Captain Marvel initially, it was not a bad movie to me. I enjoyed myself, I thought it was fun, I just didn't think it was anything special. Thinking back on it a year later and going back to analyze it, yeah, it was pretty bad, actually. The reason I know this is because when I was sitting down and looking over all the films I had seen last year and picking which ones to make each list, I had completely forgotten that I had even seen Captain Marvel. I was scrolling down the list and it popped up and I was like, oh yeah, that did happen, didn't it? Not a good sign for any movie, but especially not a good sign for the first female-led film in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Now, I know the film has its fans, it's not a terrible film by any means, but it is very forgettable. If you want to see a good superhero movie with lots of girl power, go watch Wonder Woman again. That was great. Unfortunately, there is nothing marvelous about Captain Marvel. Oh boy, so we get to hear the cop side of the story in the Bonnie and Clyde chase. This should be exciting. No. Turns out that telling the opposite side of a really exciting story otherwise is not always a good thing. I liked the idea behind the Highwaymen. I think it was cool to explore the law enforcement side of the Bonnie and Clyde hunt, but is just really kind of boring. You'd think that there would be more action and there'd be a lot more chases and more hyper-intensive investigation and things like that, but it's mostly just a lot of them going in circles and picking up hints from people. I do think the chemistry between Kevin Costner and Woody Harrelson is actually really good, and they are the one thing that saves this film from sinking all the way down to the bottom. But man, the pacing and everything is just so ungodly slow. I'm not saying they were right, but maybe Bonnie and Clyde were just the more interesting people. Disney, this has to stop. Look, I was on board for the live action remakes for a little while, but this is just getting out of hand by now. They're not even trying to hide the fact that these are clearly just blatant cash grabs meant to pry on the pockets of our nostalgia. These movies really have no justification for existing outside of the fact that they made a lot of money. And you know whose fault that is? Look, I get that people like Disney, I get that there is certainly an audience for these sorts of things, but come on, people, have some standards. Demand more from your entertainment companies. It's a baby movie for babies. Look, in all honesty, Wonder Park is really not that bad of a movie. It's watchable. It's just made for babies. Whereas other animation studios like DreamWorks and Pixar will try and put some more substance into their film to give something for everybody, there's really nothing here for adults. It's good if you need some background noise to get your tiny monsters to shut up, but that's about it. You know, I don't actually think men would want this. Or women. Or anyone for that matter. In an age of woke movie studios where executives seem to think that the best way to get the female audience to come in and see a movie is to take an old property and swap the genders, What Men Want proves that maybe this is not a good idea and we should stop now. The Mel Gibson film from back in the day, What Women Want, was also pretty forgettable, and it turns out when you swap the genders and make it the other way around, it's still pretty bad. I think what studios really ought to do is ask themselves, what do people want? And it is not this garbage.
See, I don't like that.
So, those are my worst of the year. Like I said, there weren't quite as many of them, and to be honest, they weren't all terrible films all around. They were just kind of the lesser ones from what I remember. So I hope you enjoyed my few little opinions on the year of 2019. A pretty good year for movies all around, and so I'm looking forward to seeing what 2020 has to offer. But on that note, 2020 has new things to offer with the channel. So like I said, I am going to be switching some things up with this channel, doing some renovations and some rebranding, all in the sake of making things better for you. When I started this channel a few years ago, the idea behind it was that I wanted to start a review channel that focused on things that other reviewers don't really focus on. Specifically, I wanted to focus on all of the amazing and maybe not so amazing content that is available to stream on Netflix. And while I still think that was a pretty good idea at the time, the problem is there are now many more streaming services and many of them have become much more robust in their offerings, and so I feel it is unfair to continue to keep focusing solely on Netflix. With streaming services like Disney Plus now, Hulu, HBO Go, Amazon Prime, all of these things offer really, really great things and content for people to watch. And so I think it would be a disservice to continue focusing solely on my one little narrow alleyway. So with that said, I am going to be taking the next few months off to kind of get things tidied up and cleaned up for you. I am not going to tell you the name of the new channel yet, but you'll just have to see that for yourself. Thank you again so much for all of your continued support over the last few years. I really enjoyed doing this channel. I enjoy bringing this content to you, talking about film, talking about shows. It's really something that I am passionate about, and I hope to continue doing this for a long time to come. So, for the very last time, my name is Derek, this is the Netflix Knowhow, and as always, if you want to know your flicks, you know where to click. I will see you guys all next time. Thanks for hanging around.